All right, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you checked something out yesterday on Pearl Harbor. Something we should never forget, an event that should never be forgotten. All right, so remember December 7th. Okay, a date that will live in infamy, right? Okay, so today I'll put up your vocab, just a few of them today. That's about it. So the only thing I want you to know right now is human rights and incorporation. Human rights and incorporation. So I'll give you a few seconds. You can pause that. You can work on that, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to move on. So I'll give you a couple seconds here. So pause the video if you like. Write down those two definitions. And then I will get back to you here soon. All right, here we go. So I hope you have that down. Make sure you have that down. And today we're going to continue on with our notes on chapter 13 in our books, but it's chapter 5 what we're doing now. It's going to be constitutional freedom. So I know we went over the Constitution. I know we talked about that in pretty good detail. And now I just want to discuss and go over how, maybe some of these freedoms could be restricted or limited depending on the certain situation. I just want to check if that's okay. Yes, we are good. All right, so yesterday we talked about your First Amendment rights, which we already know. Freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, petition the government. In many cases, which we'll talk about, specific court cases, how they could be limited, how they could be, in a way, try to prevent any type of harm or any type of danger. Right? If this freedom of speech, assembly, expression, whatever it might be, is inciting danger, then yes, it could be limited to on. And depending the situation, right? If we're in war, right? If we're in conflict, or if there's issues arising in our country that needs to be handled in a certain way. All right, so here's the types of speech I would like you to know. So the First Amendment exists to protect the expression of unpopular ideas. Popular ideas need little protection. So we have pure speech, okay, verbal expression of thought and opinion before an audience that has chosen to listen. So this might be like an assembly. This might be something like people getting together for, a sermon maybe, or this might be a discussion that's going on at a certain assembly. Okay, whatever it might be, but this is the verbal communication. All right, this might be a speech, whatever it might be. Okay, which we'll talk about certain court cases that deal with this verbal expression and how in certain ways this could be limited on depending where you're at, depending on the certain times, okay, depending on what might be going on in the world or in our country. All right, so symbolic speech is the other type of speech I'd like you to know. So this is expressive conduct. It involves the use of actions, symbols, in addition to or instead of words to express opinions. So rather than speaking, rather than going out into a huge, large assembly room and speaking what you have to say and getting it off your chest, right? You are walking around maybe with a shirt. Maybe it is something that you have with a symbol that you're going to use with your hands. Or maybe it's something that is on your shirt, right? Like an armband, which we're going to discuss and talk about today. So symbolic speech, you're not expressing it, you're not saying it, you're not using verbal action to display your concerns or your issues with a certain topic, but you're displaying it. Okay, it's a sense of expressing your opinion without actually saying it. Okay, you're expressing it through different means, through different actions. Okay, again, it might be just an armband, which we're going to talk about today. So symbolic speech has less protection than pure speech. So protected is picketing, flag burning, black armbands, which we're going to discuss about today. Not protected, burning draft cards, burning a cross with the intent to intimidate, camping on the Capitol Hill. All right, so we're going to go over some of these issues, especially with burning draft cards. All right, when we get to the Vietnam War, that's a huge issue, especially with symbolic speech as well. Okay, and why America, in certain ways, might be targeted depending on their actions. Maybe it's something going on in the world or a conflict that might be arising that people might not stand for, that they might not believe in. And that's happened all throughout history, where many people express their beliefs in certain ways of assembly. Okay, again, these actions could be limited. Right? Yes, I know the First Amendment protects your right for freedom of speech, assembly, religion, you name it. But in certain cases, there could be, a disciplinary action depending on how you're doing certain things or the certain time period that's happening that that might cause issues of rioting or rebellion that in many cases could be limited, right? Your freedom of speech in that First Amendment. All right, so the standard, content neutral, the government limits the minimum speech needed to protect a government interest, right? So we all know that. We all know that. So this might be like with the Vietnam War, people that are burning their draft cards, or someone that might have an issue with what's going on in the United States and with the Sedition Espionage Act. Many people believe that's against our First Amendment rights, which we're going to talk about. Certain court cases, how that challenged that freedom of speech and that First Amendment. But because of government interest, it was protected, that it was incited with the government. And with schools, right? Schools, you as students are citizens. You have the rights, same rights as adults. So in certain court cases, which we're going to talk about today, your rights don't be, your rights aren't stripped from you or taken away from you as you walk into the school. That just won't happen, right? So in many cases, the policies that are established by a school are protected, right? Okay, and in many ways, you are limited to certain things that you can say and do in school. All right, one of the biggest ones that I'd like you to know, okay, the first court case I want to talk about is Tinker versus Moines. I have a video for this, so please check it out. It's really good. It explains the court case a little bit more in detail of what actually happened. So protects the rights to wear black armbands in school to protest the Vietnam War. So the Tinkers were a family. They thought and wanted to think and express their viewpoint on the Vietnam War. And rather than just coming out and saying it or expressing their viewpoints or opinions through verbal interactions with people or an assembly, okay, they wanted to wear black armbands, a symbolic speech, right, to express their opinion or view on the Vietnam War. And as they were walking through school, they put these armbands on, and it caused a lot of attention, especially because this was a huge divide in American history on whether or not we should be involved in this Vietnam War. What's the point of it, right? And then there's people thought, well, because the spread of communism, the Cold War was heated at the time, and we need to try to get involved in order to try to prevent show peace, and we want to try to show our opinion on why the United States should not be involved in this war. Okay, and the symbolic speech was expressed with these black armbands, and the school had a big stink about it. They're like, you know what, this isn't right. Okay, this is going to incite different type of violence and hostility amongst the students. Okay, if people see each other walking down the hallways with these black armbands, they might get beat up. Okay, they might be causing issues to the current school day, or what objectives might be set by the teacher in the classroom. Many students might not be paying attention to it. They might be just still showing hatred and heated confrontation towards another student, depending on the way they're expressing themselves with this black armband. And let's face it, still happens today, like with political opinions. If someone wears a shirt, or someone's wearing a hat, well, really not a hat in school, but let's say they're wearing a shirt in school, that might cause an issue with another student, depending on their political beliefs. But in this case, the school district thought this is inciting some sort of hostility and inciting a conflict with the school day because of the way they're expressing themselves in school. And we'll talk about other court cases that conflict with Tinker versus Moines. But students didn't give up their freedom of speech here at the door. They thought, you know what, we want to represent and express our opinion about the war with these armbands. And they actually won. The students won. Okay, the school district lost in this case because they couldn't take away the students' freedom of speech and the way they wanted to express themselves with these armbands. And we'll talk about other court cases, how school districts actually won in this very similar instance and example, right, of freedom of speech. And this really proved to many people and students, right, that they have a voice, that they can form groups together to try to express their opinions. And although that they're kids and they're not adults, they still have the freedoms that many adults have, and that the school can't limit these freedom of speech, right? And we'll talk about this more when we get to other court cases, specifically during World War II, of how and World War I, how some of these freedoms are limited, especially during school time, depending on what they're expressing and during the certain time period. Right. But during Vietnam War, 1969, the Tinkers won this court case of how they wanted to express themselves through symbolic speech with these armbands. Again, check out the video. I think it's very interesting. I like you to know a little bit more about this certain court case, and that video does a good job expressing the ins and outs of it. Okay, I just gave you the summary of that court case. All right, so remember pure speech, symbolic speech, and with Tinker versus Moines during the Vietnam War, this is a great way of expressing how the school district couldn't limit this symbolic speech that were expressed by the Tinkers with these black armbands. So whenever you see it on the test, you see Tinker versus Moines, which I think is a unique last name. Think of the armbands during the Vietnam War, okay, and how it was actually a victory for the students, that they didn't lose their constitutional freedoms just because they're students. All right. So that's all I have for today. Have a good one. Check out that video again. All right. And I will be sending back your results for your test. Okay. That will be sent through an email to you. It's on Sapphire already, but I'll send back those results. All right. Take care. Have a good one.